Particularly if you're new to the critique process, you might want to get started by just performing a basic compositional critique. All right, so to get the hang of this, let's do an abbreviated version. We're going to look at all four elements, but with simplicity, we're just going to count the number of image elements and look at separations. For asymmetry, we'll just look to make sure that the key elements are either in the center of the image or away from the center. For eye lines, we'll identify, see if we have any eye lines in the image, and then we'll establish the point of view and ask, hey, is this a good point of view, or could something else make it a little bit more compelling image? So all the basic components of the critique, just not looking at all the details. And remember, always begin with the strengths and then identify the weaknesses. Now, typically, we like to look at more than one image. Just evaluating and doing a critique on one image for someone, it can be somewhat helpful, but it's much more helpful if I look at multiple images. Typically, when someone hires me to perform a critique for them, I ask them for a minimum of 5 images. And of course, if you're looking at a project, then you would have multiple images anyway. And here's a kayak project in Tutka Bay Fjord where we live. This is my partner, Christina. We're out enjoying kayaking in Tutka Bay Fjord. So let's look at these 2 images. We could look at more, but I think we can get the idea just by looking at these 2 images. And we're going to count the number of image elements, and then we're going to look at the separation. Well, let's start with the left-hand image. And we count the number of elements. Well, there's the kayak and Christina as one element, then the water, and then we've got the background mountains, and then we've got the sky. So there's 4 elements in this image. So this image has some real good strengths to it in terms of number of image elements. When we evaluate the right-hand image, again, there's some nice image elements here, right? The kayak and Christina, she's in mid-stroke, which is very nice. But when we count the number of elements here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and maybe even 7. So at least 5 elements and maybe up to 7, depending on how you count them. So just in terms of these 2 criteria, the image on the left is really more successful in terms of its composition. Well, let's go to the next element, and that is how well are these image elements separated? Well, again, in the left-hand image, both Christina and the kayak are well separated from the water and the mountains back here. The water and the mountains have good contrast. The mountains and the sky have good contrast. So in terms of overall separation, again, this is a very successful image. On the right-hand image, there's some separation here, like between the nice bright colors of Christina and the kayak, the orange and the purple against the darker gray-brown background. But other elements are not quite so well separated, like this kayak and the water are not very well separated. And we've got overlapping here of the paddle with this kayak. So there's really not good separation here. And there's some separation between the rocks and the trees. And there is good separation up here between the trees and the sky. But it's the foreground here, which is where we're really focusing our attention, where the separation kind of fails to really engage us. So again, the left-hand image is going to be the superior of the 2 in terms of both number of elements and separation. And when we look at asymmetry, let's look at the key elements, where they are in the image, locate them, and see if they're off-center, which is how we want them. Again, let's start with the left-hand image, and we can see clearly that Christina and the kayak are not smack dab in the middle. All right, they're offset over to the left and down to the left quadrant in the 4th quadrant. So it's nicely asymmetrical. Plus, the mountains in the background are nicely asymmetrical as well. We've got the high peak over here and then down and then a lower peak on the tops of the trees. So there's nice asymmetry throughout this image. And there's also good foreground, middle ground, and background here. Over on the right-hand image, in terms of asymmetry, well, when we look at Christina and the kayak, boy, it's right smack dab in the middle of the image when you go from left to right. It's down a little bit from the center, going top to bottom. But just having that right smack dab in the middle makes this a less interesting image in terms of the asymmetry, in terms of moving the eye around the image. So again, that left-hand image scores nicely. Then, as we've spoken about many times, asymmetry and eye line, work hand in hand. And here again, when we look at the left-hand image, we see there's a nice eye line along the kayak because it's well separated from the water. And there's a beautiful physical eye line here on the sky where your eye moves across. And then nice foreground, middle ground, and background. So very nice eye lines in this image. It's a simple image. It's interesting to look at. Over on the right-hand image in terms of eye lines, there is a nice eye line get started up here in the trees, but then it kind of gets truncated up here. Notice we compare the eye line here. The eye line is continuous across the image, whereas here it's truncated. And really, because of the overlap here and the lack of separation, we don't have a really good foreground, middle ground, or background. So there's a little bit of an eye line along the kayak, but again, it's kind of interrupted on the right-hand side. So the left-hand image is the winner once again in terms of eye lines here. And then finally, when we look at point of view, we'll establish the point of view and ask, is it appropriate? Is it interesting? Is it unique? And in this case, and this is not uncommon, the point of view is about the same for both images. They're both shot from kayak, so it's kayak point of view, which is certainly appropriate for this kind of a shot. One of the questions I would ask is, if we move the camera a little bit lower and maybe shot up a little bit to give a little bit more power and prominence to the key figure in the image, all the while being very careful not to cause an intersection between Christina's head and then the nice eye line back here. So, yeah, they're about the same, and I would ask the question about maybe camera position a little bit. All right, so there we've finished our simple critique, and even using a simple critique as we have, because we've done it very deliberately and look at all 4 concepts, we can very clearly see and decide that left-hand image is going to be the winner here. So even a simple critique can be very powerful.